Senators press Treasury to clarify state authority under the Genius Act. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators, led by Cynthia Lummis, is asking the Treasury to clarify how state authority operates under the Genius Act, the federal law that set the rules for payment stablecoins. The request, reported by Cointelegraph on June 17, 2026, targets one of the least settled parts of the framework, where federal supervision ends and state supervision begins. The push lands during a quiet stretch for prices. Bitcoin traded near $65,737 as of June 17, 2026, down about 0.9% on the day, with the Fear and Greed Index at 24, in fear territory. The senator's letter is not a market event. It is a structural one, aimed at the plumbing that determines who can issue a dollar-backed token in the United States and who watches them do it. The dual-track design at the center of the dispute, the Genius Act, built a two-lane system. Larger issuers fall under federal oversight, while smaller issuers below a set threshold can opt for supervision by a state regulator whose regime the Treasury certifies as broadly equivalent. That structure was meant to let state-chartered trust companies and money transmitters keep issuing stablecoins without forcing every player into a single federal channel. The friction is in the handoff. An issuer that grows past the threshold has to move from state to federal oversight. And the conditions, timing, and mechanics of that transition are exactly what the senators want defined. Issuers planning multi-year product roadmaps cannot price compliance costs or pick a charter without knowing how the two regimes interact in practice. Lummis builds a bipartisan front. Lummis has been the Senate's most consistent voice on crypto market structure, and a bipartisan signature list raises the political cost of leaving the question open. The letter frames the ask as implementation hygiene rather than a fight over the statute itself. The law passed. The senators want the agency charged with running it to publish the operating manual. For the Treasury, the ask is awkward. Move too far toward federal primacy, and state regulators lose the relevance the statute promised them. Lean toward state deference, and you risk a patchwork where an issuer's obligations shift across state lines. The clarity the senators want forces the agency to draw a line it has so far left soft: stablecoins and the cards that settle on them. This matters beyond compliance desks. Stablecoins are the settlement layer for a growing share of crypto cards, where a USDC or similar balance is converted to fiat at the point of sale. The strength of a stablecoin's redemption guarantee, the transparency of its reserves, and the regulator standing behind the issuer all feed directly into whether a card program can lean on it. A card that spends from a stablecoin balance is, in effect, trusting that the token will always redeem one-to-one. That trust is a regulatory product as much as a technical one. When an issuer's supervisor is clearly defined with reserve rules and examination authority attached, the token underneath everyday spending becomes more predictable. When the supervisor is ambiguous, the risk does not vanish. It just moves to whoever holds the token last. The same logic shapes which issuers' card programs are willing to integrate. A clear federal or state pathway lowers the diligence burden on a card provider deciding whose stablecoin to support. An unclear one pushes providers toward the largest, most obviously regulated names and away from smaller state-chartered issuers, which is the opposite of what the dual-track design intended. The practical stakes for issuers and users. For issuers, the open question is operational. Where do they register? How much capital and reporting does each route demand? And what triggers a forced move to federal oversight? For users, the stakes are simpler. A stablecoin with a clearly accountable regulator is one whose dollar peg has institutional backing if something breaks. That is the difference between a token that is convenient and one that is dependable enough to sit behind a card you swipe for groceries. None of this is resolved by a single letter. The senators have asked. The Treasury has not yet answered. The signal worth tracking is whether the agency responds with concrete guidance on the state-to-federal handoff or lets the ambiguity stand.